The city of Boston was always alive with movement, yet inside the Carter household, time felt as if it had stopped. For 12-year-old Lily Carter, the world had changed forever 3 years ago after the car accident that left her confined to a wheelchair. Before the crash, she was full of energy, climbing trees in the backyard, running across the school playground, and riding her pink bicycle with the wind in her hair. But after the accident, the little girl who once ran with laughter now sat in silence, her bright eyes often hiding the storm of emotions she carried inside. Her parents, Mark and Susan Carter, tried their best to stay strong for her. They were well off, financially secure, and deeply loving, but no amount of money could buy back their daughter's mobility. They took her to Boston's top hospitals, consulted the most renowned doctors, and even traveled out of state in search of specialists. Each time, the result was the same: sympathetic glances, medical jargon, and the painful words, "She will never walk again." Those words cut deeper than any wound, and they slowly crushed the hope that once burned brightly in the Carter family's hearts. The Carter home, once filled with Lily's footsteps and laughter, grew quieter with each passing day. Susan decorated Lily's room with soft colors and fairy lights to keep her spirits alive, while Mark buried himself in work, trying to cover the growing medical expenses. Lily, despite her parents' efforts, felt the weight of pity in every visitor's eyes. Friends at school moved on with their lives, sports, dances, trips, but she remained bound to a chair, pretending it didn't hurt. She had grown used to hiding her pain behind polite smiles, but deep down, the loneliness consumed her. Autumn arrived in Boston, with crisp winds carrying the smell of fallen leaves and roasted chestnuts from street vendors. One late afternoon, Susan pushed Lily's wheelchair home from a nearby bookstore where they often went to escape reality in stories. The chair had been creaking for weeks, and though Susan kept reminding herself to call a technician, life's distractions got in the way. As they passed a small auto repair shop tucked between brick buildings, the chair gave a harsh jolt and suddenly broke down. One of the wheels jammed, leaving Lily stranded in the middle of the sidewalk. Susan knelt down, frustrated tears brimming in her eyes. "Not again," she whispered, tugging at the wheel that refused to budge. Lily looked down at her hands folded in her lap, trying not to cry. She hated being the reason her mother was always so stressed. Across the street, the warm glow of an old garage flickered. Through its open doors, inside sparks flew as a man in oil-stained overalls worked on a dented pickup truck, hearing the commotion. He wiped his hands on a rag and stepped outside. His name was Jack Turner, a 42-year-old mechanic who had seen his share of life. Hardships. Jack wasn't a wealthy man. His shop was small, cluttered, and barely making enough to keep the lights on. But what he lacked in wealth, he made up for in compassion. When he saw Susan struggling with the chair and the young girl sitting silently in it, something inside him stirred. Recognized the frustration in the mother's eyes and the quiet resignation in the child's face. Without hesitation, he walked over, crouched down, and examined the wheel with gentle focus. "Looks like she's stuck pretty good," he said softly, glancing at Lily with a reassuring smile. Lily studied him carefully. She was used to people looking at her with pity or exaggerated cheerfulness, as if she were fragile glass about to break. But Jack's eyes held none of that. They were kind, steady, and full of quiet determination. He didn't ask about her condition or why she was in the chair. He simply treated the problem in front of him like any other repair. "Don't worry," he said, pulling a small toolkit from his belt. "Machines can be fixed. Maybe people can too." His words, casual as they sounded, struck something deep inside Lily. Susan watched him work with a mixture of relief and curiosity. She had grown used to dismissive service people who rushed through tasks without a second glance. but Jack handled the chair with a care that felt almost personal, as if fixing it mattered. Beyond just tightening bolts, within minutes the wheel began to loosen. Lily leaned forward, fascinated, her earlier sadness giving way to curiosity. Jack explained each step in simple terms, showing her the rusted axle and the misaligned bearings. He didn't talk down to her, he spoke as if she were capable of understanding, as if she mattered. "See this?" Jack said, holding up the damaged part. "That's why your wheel keeps jamming. Whoever put this together didn't think long term. But don't worry, I've got something in the shop that'll work better." Lily's lips curled into a small smile, the first genuine one in weeks. Susan felt her chest tighten with emotion. In just a few moments, this stranger had done something no doctor, no therapist, and not even she had managed to do recently: make her daughter forget her pain long enough to smile again. Jack disappeared into his shop and returned with a spare part, installing it with swift efficiency. As he worked, he hummed softly under his breath, the sound filling the silence that had hung heavy over the Carter women. Lily found herself leaning closer, fascinated by the way his hands moved, steady and sure, coated with grease yet precise. When he finally tightened the last bolt and gave the wheel a spin, the chair rolled smoothly across the pavement. "There we go," he said with a grin. "Good as new, well, maybe even better than new." Susan let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. Jack shrugged it off, brushing his hands against his overalls. "No need to thank me. I just fix things. That's what I do." But when he glanced at Lily, he saw the light in her eyes, a flicker of hope he recognized all too well. He'd been broken once too. Years ago, when life had taken things from him he thought he'd never recover. Yet here he was, still standing, still fixing. Maybe, just maybe, he could pass that belief on. As Susan prepared to push Lily home, Jack gave a small wave. "If that chair acts up again, you know where to find me." Lily nodded, her smile lingering even after they left. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like just a girl in a broken chair. She felt seen, not as someone to pity, but as someone worth believing in. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the fairy lights above her, Jack's words echoed in her mind. Machines can be fixed. Maybe people can too. And for the first time, she dared to imagine a future not bound by wheels, but by hope. Jack couldn't get the image of Lily's smile out of his head that night. He had seen broken machines, shattered engines, rusted parts, things most people would toss away as useless. But he had always believed they could be repaired. For years, his work had been about fixing cars, but when he saw Lily's smile, something clicked inside him. This wasn't just about repairing a chair, it was about giving a little girl back something she thought she had lost forever. That thought alone kept him awake, sketching designs on old notepads scattered across his cluttered workbench. The garage smelled of oil, metal, and burnt rubber, yet to Jack it was a place of invention. He picked up spare pipes, bolts, and wheels, imagining what he could build. Doctors had told the Carters that Lily's legs would never carry her again, but Jack didn't accept that. He wasn't a doctor, but he knew resilience when he saw it. If an engine can run again after breaking down, then maybe so can she, he muttered to himself, his pencil scratching across the page as he drew something new, half wheelchair, half walking aid. The next afternoon, when Lily and Susan passed by, Jack invited them into the shop. At first, Susan hesitated, worried about false hope. She had seen so many experts fail. What could a mechanic possibly do? But Lily's eyes lit up as soon as she saw Jack again, and she tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Please, Mom, just for a little while." Inside, the shop was cluttered with parts, tools hanging from the walls, and the faint hum of a radio playing old rock songs. Yet for Lily, it felt like stepping into a place where magic could happen. Jack showed her the rough sketch of the device. It looked strange, cobbled together with notes written in grease pencil, but his excitement was contagious. "This won't be easy," he warned, crouching to Lily's level. "It'll take time, and you'll have to work hard, but if you're willing to try, I'll be right here." Lily's heart pounded. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not as someone fragile, but as someone capable. She nodded eagerly, and for the first time in years, Susan saw a spark in her daughter's eyes that even doctors couldn't ignite. Day after day, Lily returned to the shop. At first, she simply watched Jack weld pieces of metal together, sparks lighting up the dim garage like tiny stars. He explained each step to her, letting her hold screws and tools, treating her like an apprentice instead of a patient. Slowly, her visits became the highlight of her days. She wasn't just the girl in the wheelchair anymore. She was part of a project, part of something bigger. And each time she laughed at Jack's clumsy jokes, Susan felt tears welling in her eyes because laughter had been rare for too long. As the frame began to take shape, Jack started encouraging Lily to try small exercises. He positioned her between two sturdy bars he'd installed in the shop and asked her to push herself just a little. At first, her legs trembled uncontrollably, and she could barely lift her foot an inch. Sweat gathered on her forehead, and frustration made her want to quit. But Jack clapped his hands and grinned. "Engines don't start smooth," he reminded her. "They sputter, cough, and stall, but once they catch, they run stronger than ever." Lily giggled at the thought, then tried again. Susan watched nervously, afraid of Lily falling or hurting herself, but Jack stayed close, steady hands always ready to catch her. "I've got you," he whispered each time she wavered. Slowly, step by step, Lily began to trust him and herself. The effort was exhausting, her muscles weak from years of disuse, but she never felt alone. Every wobble was met with encouragement, every stumble with a cheer. In Jack's garage, failure wasn't shameful. It was simply part of the process. That simple truth made Lily braver than she had ever been in hospital rooms filled with sterile silence. Weeks passed, and the strange device began to look more polished. Jack welded a supportive frame with padded handles, attached wheels that could lock in place, and even added adjustments so Lily could practice shifting her weight safely. It wasn't beautiful in the traditional sense it looked, like a cross between an exoskeleton and a walker, but to Lily it was extraordinary. She nicknamed it the Machine, and Jack laughed so hard that he promised to carve the name onto the frame once it was finished. Together, they made progress, one shaky step at a time. Each day, Lily grew a little stronger. She began to push herself off the chair with determination, balancing on trembling legs while gripping the frame. At first, it was only for a few seconds, but those seconds turned into minutes. Susan couldn't believe her eyes. After years of hearing doctors say impossible, she was watching her daughter's body respond. One evening, when Mark Carter came to pick them up, he froze in shock at the sight of his little girl standing upright with Jack's support. Tears streamed down his face before he could even speak. "She's standing," he whispered. Jack shrugged modestly, wiping grease from his forehead. "She's doing it," he said, "not me. I just built the frame. The rest is her courage." But deep inside, he felt something shift. For years, Jack had seen himself as just a mechanic, someone who fixed cars and paid bills. But with Lily, he realized his hands could build more than machines. They could build hope. And that realization made every sleepless night, every aching muscle, and every scar from welding burns worth it. He had found a purpose greater than survival. He had found the chance to change a life. Then came the morning that would change everything. The sun filtered through the garage windows, painting the dusty floor with golden light. Lily stood inside the machine, gripping the handles as Jack steadied her. Her legs shook violently, her breaths came shallow, but something in her eyes burned brighter than fear. "Ready?" Jack asked softly. She nodded. Slowly, with immense effort, she lifted one foot and placed it forward, then the other. It wasn't graceful, it was clumsy, uneven and fragile, but it was a step. Susan gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Mark choked back a sob. Jack cheered loudly, his voice echoing through the garage. "That's it! That's a step, Lily! You did it!" Tears streamed down Lily's face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were the tears of a girl who had been told she never would, now proving that she could. She turned her head toward her parents, who rushed forward, their emotions overwhelming them. Susan hugged her from behind, whispering, "I knew you could, baby. I knew you could." Mark's arms wrapped around both of them, his shoulders shaking with pride and relief. The impossible was no longer impossible. Lily wobbled, but Jack steadied her with strong hands. "You see," he said, smiling warmly, "engines don't start smooth, but once they do, nothing stops them." That day, the garage wasn't just a workshop. It was a miracle ground, a place where broken hope had been welded back together. And as Lily stood tall, her heart soaring higher than it had in years, she realized that life wasn't about what doctors said she couldn't do. It was about believing in what she still could. Word of Lily's first steps spread quickly through the neighborhood. People who had known the Carter family for years couldn't believe it. After all, everyone remembered the endless hospital visits, the somber faces, and the way Lily had once sat quietly in her chair at the park. Now, whispers of her miracle carried from the bakery to the schoolyard. Parents told their children about the brave little girl who walked again. Yet for Jack, none of this mattered. He wasn't seeking attention. All he wanted was to see Lily smile as freely as she had that unforgettable morning in the garage. The next weekend, Lily asked her parents if they could go to the park. Nervous but hopeful, Susan and Mark agreed. Jack came along carrying the machine in the back of his truck. As the autumn swirled in the crisp Boston air, Lily stood with determination. With Jack steadying her frame, she took step after shaky step, her feet crunching over the golden leaves. Children stopped playing to watch, and then the most magical sound filled the air. Lily's laughter, bright and unstoppable, it rang out across the park, reminding everyone what courage truly looked like. Mark and Susan stood close by, tears sliding down their cheeks as they clapped for their daughter. They had imagined this moment in their dreams, but never dared to believe it would come true. Now, it was real. Strangers passing through the park stopped. Many of them moved to tears themselves, some whispering prayers of gratitude, others recording the moment to share. But Jack stayed quietly in the background, his arms crossed, eyes focused only on Lily's progress. For him, fame or recognition meant nothing. Seeing her walk, hearing her laugh, that was the reward worth more than anything else. Later that evening, back at the Carter home, Susan and Mark sat Jack down in their living room. The house that had once felt so heavy with silence now buzzed with warmth. They poured him coffee and spoke with deep gratitude. "Jack, you've given us back our daughter," Susan said, her voice trembling. "We can't let this go unpaid. Please let us help you, at least financially." But Jack shook his head firmly. "I didn't do this for money. I did it because she deserved another chance." His words carried a sincerity that silenced the room with humble power. Jack leaned forward, his eyes shining with conviction. "But I'll tell you what I do want. I want to build more of these devices for other kids like Lily. There are families out there who can't afford doctors or hospitals, kids who've been told it's impossible. But if we can give them hope, why shouldn't we?" His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, not from doubt, but from the weight of a new dream forming. Mark exchanged a look with Susan, and without hesitation both nodded. "Then let's do it," Mark said. Together. A new chapter was born that night. The Carters had connections, resources, and determination. Jack had the skills, creativity, and heart. Together, they founded a small non-profit organization, turning Jack's modest garage into a workshop with a bigger purpose. At first, it was just them, Jack hammering, welding and building frames, while Susan organized schedules and Mark reached out to local families. Lily became the heart of the project, greeting every child who visited, her smile proof that miracles could happen in the most unexpected places. Slowly, word spread and soon more families came, each with their own stories of loss, struggle, and quiet hope. The workshop buzzed with life in a way it never had before. Tools clattered, sparks flew, and laughter echoed off the oil-stained walls. Jack worked long hours, his hands raw and blistered, but he never once complained. Every time he saw a child stand a little taller, every time he heard whisper, "Thank you," it fueled him more than sleep ever could. Susan managed paperwork, while Mark handled fundraising, organizing community events that brought in donations. What began as one man's idea quickly grew into a movement, neighbors volunteering, local businesses offering supplies, and families donating what they could. For Lily, the workshop became her second home. She loved helping Jack hand out tools, learning the names of bolts and screws, and cheering on the other children who came for help. Sometimes, she even walked alongside them, holding their hands as they wobbled forward. Her laughter became the workshop's anthem, reminding everyone that courage was contagious. Children who once felt defeated now felt inspired by her story, and parents who thought all hope was gone found strength watching their little ones take steps of their own. The workshop was no longer about machines. It was about rebuilding lives. One day, a mother arrived with her son, a boy no older than 9. He had been in a chair since birth, and his eyes carried the weight of disappointment. Jack knelt beside him, just as he had with Lily months before, and said the same words. "Machines can be fixed. Maybe people can too." The boy's eyes lit up, and his mother wept quietly in the corner. That night, Jack stayed up late building a smaller, lighter frame for the child. When the boy took his first step days later, the workshop erupted with cheers, and Lily clapped louder than anyone. As the months passed, local news outlets caught wind of the story. Reporters came to interview Jack, but he always redirected the spotlight. "This isn't about me," he'd say, standing beside Lily. "It's about what happens when you refuse to give up." Photos of smiling children standing for the first time filled newspapers, and donations began pouring in. Soon the workshop expanded, with volunteers from nearby universities offering engineering help and medical students assisting with a therapy. Jack remained humble through it all, never forgetting the simple truth that had started it. A girl who believed again, and a mechanic who dared to try. One crisp spring morning, Lily truly ran, for the first time since her accident. Across the park, her parents chased after her, laughing through tears, while Jack stood back with quiet pride. He didn't need applause or headlines. Watching her hair fly in the wind and hearing her shout with joy was enough. Every step Lily took was proof that the impossible wasn't permanent. It was only waiting for someone stubborn enough to challenge it. And Jack, with his grease-stained hands and humble heart, had built more than a machine. He had built a path for children to walk into tomorrow. Years later, people would look back on that little garage as the place where miracles began. The walls, once lined with old tools and rusted parts, had seen the birth of a foundation that changed countless lives. And though Jack never considered himself a hero, the children who walked out of his workshop would always remember him as the man who looked past brokenness and saw potential. For Lily, every new stride reminded her of the day when doctors gave up, but a mechanic with nothing more than faith and determination gave her back the power to walk into tomorrow.